Let's talk about the elephant in the bedroom. Not the one sitting on the bed scrolling Instagram, the other one. The thing couples don't talk about with friends. They don't bring it up at dinner parties, and they definitely don't post about it on social media. What happens when intimacy quietly disappears from a marriage? Most people assume a no sex marriage means someone lost attraction, but the truth is usually far less dramatic and far more fixable. In many cases, it's not that your partner doesn't want you, it's that your relationship system between you stopped producing safety, connection, and desire. And here's the scary part. Most couples don't realize it's happening until months or even years have gone by. If you're stuck in a dead bedroom, this episode is designed to help you understand the pattern and begin changing it without begging, blaming, keeping score, or feeling like you're walking through your own house on eggshells. And later in the episode today, we're going to cover something that almost nobody talks about: the phrases and conversations many men think are helping the situation, but are actually making desire disappear even faster. Welcome to the Masters of Wellness podcast, where we explore the intersection of Eastern wisdom and Western science to help you become healthier, stronger, and fully alive. I'm Chuck Smith, and today we're tackling a topic that, whether we like to admit it or not, affects far more marriages than people realize, and one that creates a tremendous amount of silent suffering. Now, here's why this matters. This is not today just a conversation about sex. It's about connection. It's about confidence. It's about feeling wanted by the person you've chosen to build your life with. Because when intimacy disappears, most people don't just lose physical connection. They start losing communication, patience, playfulness, friendship, and sometimes even hope. The reality is that thousands of couples are living more like roommates than romantic partners, while convincing themselves everything is fine because nobody's actively fighting. But distance doesn't always show up as a conflict. Sometimes it shows up as silence. Ignore it long enough and resentment moves in. Address it right away and you can rebuild intimacy, trust, attraction, and respect. Joining us today is Orist Komarnyckyj. Orist works with men who find themselves in sexless marriages and feel stuck, frustrated, confused, and often completely out of ideas. His work helps men understand not only how those patterns develop, but also what they're unintentionally doing that may be keeping those patterns alive. Today, we're going to unpack how a marriage gets here, why so many couples stay stuck, what actually works to create change, and how men can lead that change without manipulation, pressure, or becoming someone they're not. Orist, welcome to the Masters of Wellness podcast.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. It's a pleasure. So tell us about your journey, right? What pulled you into this kind of work?
A few people, including my personal coach, told me I should do this. And so that's kind of how I ended up here. And it's an interesting space because I will often have conversations with men that they would never have with anyone else.
I bet.
I guarantee you that they will not have that conversation with anyone else because it is so challenging. It's pointed. It hurts. And there's a lot of frustration, a lot of anger, a lot of bewilderment.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have that conversation. And actually, having that conversation in many ways is cathartic because they actually express the truth. And a lot of time, as we're getting into the coaching session, I find that men will lie. They'll try to pretend that shit isn't as bad as it is or whatever, or they have it under control, blah, 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 all that stuff. But men will often lie. And I find it pretty easy to sniff out because quite often what happens is somebody will tell me something in our conversation, our coaching session, and 5 minutes later, they tell me something else. And I'm like, okay, those two things cannot be true at the same time. Okay, they just can't be. It's not even degrees of truthfulness. It's just they can't be. And so part of it is getting men to be honest. Part of that honesty is with me, but mostly the honesty was with yourself. So and a lot of times, you are in the forest so you can't see the trees. And so I can see the trees. And so
Yeah,
it's
that's why they need
sometimes,
you.
yeah. And so that's really kind of the biggest thing is that, it's kind of interesting. One of the things that happens quite often is that too many men try to do it alone. They go it alone and they have this idea that they're wrong about that they can solve it. And one of the things I say, if you knew how to solve this, you would have already solved it, but you don't. And the longer you let this go, the worse it is and the harder it is to fix. And it actually gets to the point where it's not fixable. It does cross that point. It's like, there is that point where like your relationship, your marriage is not fixable. Now, I'm not a therapist. I don't claim to be, but it kind of becomes obvious at a certain point that like you can't put this back together again for whatever reasons they are. And it's not blame on the guy. It's not blame on the woman. It's just not fixable. And so, Jordan Peterson writes about this, and he talks, and he's a great guy.
Hmm.
So his books are hard to read. I mean, they're intense. Have you read his Rules of Life?
I have not.
Okay, it's intense. It's very intense. I don't know if you ever seen him speak. I don't know what his IQ is, but it's really really high.
He seems
He's a really
he
really
seems like a high IQ guy. Yeah.
just the fact of what he remembers is amazing. So, but he talks about how something that is minor over time will manifest into something big, so that maybe you had something that you said to your wife that she didn't like, but she didn't say anything.
Mm.
And then she kind of does some passive aggressive shit. You do some passive aggressive shit, blah, blah, blah. And next thing you see is, 5 or 6 years later, you're walking by a restaurant and looking in the window, and there's your wife sitting having a glass of wine with some dude,
Wow.
or vice versa, or it can be vice versa. The wife was walking by and sees her husband having a glass of wine with some woman,
Hmm.
and like, okay, that didn't happen in one instance.
No.
It didn't happen. It didn't. There are people that like. There are people that kind of both men and women engage in whorish behavior. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But most of the time, those kind of things where the relationship is lost, it it happens slowly. And as you said very correctly, a lot of times people don't even know it's happening. They're totally unaware of it's happening. There's so many things in our lives that occur with our health and things like that happen that you don't really know. So before I did this, I was a periodontal regenerative surgeon, and people would tell me it doesn't hurt. Well, periodontics, bone loss around teeth, the destruction of the bone around the teeth, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt until it's actually in the late stages where you start talking about taking out everyone's teeth. And there's so many things that don't hurt in their initial stages. Cancer doesn't hurt in the initial stages. High blood pressure, hypertension doesn't hurt in the initial stages. All sorts of things don't hurt in the initial stages, but people want to wait until it starts to hurt to
It's
do
too late.
something. And by then, a lot of damage has already been done.
Yeah. So a great point, Orist. Real quick, could we define, if there is a definition, what is a no sex marriage?
Some of it depends on who you talk to. There's a few different definitions out there. No sex within a year, or sometimes sex maybe twice a year. So it's going to be really on the low frequency, zero or no frequency. I've talked to men that you haven't had sex outside of with the. I never knew about this until
Oh, he's
until
gonna go
except
somewhere
for
here. Oh, where we're
I'm gonna
going.
go somewhere. I'm gonna go somewhere, and everybody out that's listening, just you can look it up on Google it. A flesh lamp. I don't know if
God.
you ever. That's the only form of sex they have is a flesh lamp,
Okay.
and and so that's kind of and yeah, because I had to. I couldn't quite get the wording right. I had to look that up. They've gotten
Yeah.
really fancy. I mean, they're
If
really
you were too
fancy.
fast with it, I'd be a little worried.
What's that? Yeah, but it was just like I said, that's kind of thing, or eventually sometimes a lot of guys will end up in an affair. They end up in divorce. The next thing you know, they've moved out of their big beautiful house. They're living in an apartment complex with 4G cars, with rental furniture, and they got some judge telling them when they can see their kids and how they're going to spend their money. So it's not a pleasant sight. And the other thing that I found very interesting, I discovered this. I was reading Dan Kennedy. I don't know if you're familiar with Dan Kennedy. He's a big time marketer. He sold his company for several $100 million to Russell Brunson. I know you know who
Okay.
Russell Brunson.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Dan Kennedy's really big time. He's probably in the 70s now, and he wrote in his book How to Market to the Affluent, and he said that the vast majority of divorces of couples that are over 50 years old are initiated by the woman. And I thought it would have been guys, looking for a trophy wife, but no, the vast majority of them are initiated by the woman.
So there's something there. So I
Yeah.
think that's
Well,
probably gonna,
they don't like their husband anymore.
yeah, and that's probably gonna unpack a lot of what you're gonna get to today in today's episode. So maybe the next question will kind of help us guide there. What would you say most men get wrong about why it's happening?
Well, it gets very basic. There's several different avenues to a no-sex marriage, but let me just talk about one of them. The most important relationship that you have in your life is with yourself.
Hmm. Amen to that.
Okay. If you don't have a good relationship with yourself, you're screwed. You cannot have a good relationship with your wife, with your kids, with your coworkers, with your friends, with anyone, because you have a crappy relationship with yourself, and that colors all of the relationships that you have in your life, and it permeates through that. And most of the time, people that have a bad relationship with themselves, they're not pleasant to be around. They're grumpy. They have a victim mentality that runs through their brain all the time, and they're also have given away their power because they have that victim mentality. So unless you have a good relationship with yourself, then you're totally screwed. You have to fix that. And the way you get a crappy relationship with yourself is you ask all the wrong questions inside your head when you're thinking. And we literally, most people have hundreds, if not thousands, of questions or conversations that they have with themselves in a day. Your brain is always active, and your brain will give you an answer to whatever question you ask. And most of the time, a victim question starts with the word why. Why am I not having the sex I want? Why am I not getting the promotion that I want? Why am
Mhm.
I not making the money that I want? Why do people find me so offensive? Why am I living alone? Why, which is very close to wine. And so your brain, and not WINE, your
Yeah.
brain, well, I have to spell that for all the dyslexics. I'm a dyslexic, so I just dyslexic I can't spell this day. Thank God for autocorrect, Grammarly.
Yeah.
So so that your brain, when you start asking yourself these questions, gives you answers all the time to substantiate the question that you're asking. And so that further and further ingrains that behavior that you really don't want, but you keep on doing things that are causing it to be further and further ingrained. And consequently, you become this miserable person who no one wants to be around, including your wife, including your kids. And you probably don't have any friends,
Mm.
because who wants to be like around that kind of person who's always complaining, bitching, never happy, nothing is ever good enough, and so that they are unpleasant to be around. And so, and they always have that victim thing. They have the, I'm not in control. Things happen to me. Why does that always happen to me? Whatever. Things always happen to them. And so the other thing that women don't find very attractive is a emasculated man
For sure.
who plays the victim card all the time. So it's a hard thing to break out of. I had a significant victim conversation in my head my whole life, actually, most of my life, and so it was really hard to break that conversation and to change it in a way that served me. And one of the things that I think we talked about this before we started recording. So I was involved in a big litigation in the 1987 that went on for about 6 years. And during that litigation, I was in a really bad place. You can imagine, just it's a it's a truth. And one of the things is that when you're in litigation, your lawyer tells you you can't talk to anyone because they can be subpoenaed as a witness, and that will come up during the discovery, during the interrogatories, during the depositions, all of that stuff. So, and then all of a sudden, next thing you know, people that have you don't want to be deposed, they're being deposed because you talk about, so you don't.
So you just talk to
And
yourself,
so,
and you don't have
yeah,
it.
you just
You're
talk to yourself.
not giving yourself the good
But
answers.
yeah, but then what I started doing during that very, very dark time, I started listening to, this will tell you how long it was, cassettes from Tony Robbins. And most of the time when people do programs, and this is one of the reasons why they don't work, is they listen to the cassettes and don't do any of the exercises. The biggest places to listen to a cassette or now to the whatever, on Audible or whatever, is in your car or at the gym. Well, you're not focused on it and you're not doing the exercises and you're not going to go home from the gym and after working out and do the exercises and listen to everything. So I actually, because I was in such a desperate place, I actually started listening to those and I started doing the exercises. It was very interesting that once I changed my frame of reference, then my whole, and it took a while. It took a couple of years,
But
but my whole frame of reference, and all of a sudden I became the person who can do, and who can create the relationship they want with his wife. I wasn't married at that time. I was engaged, and that engagement fell apart. Actually, a very nice woman, very smart woman. She was actually the youngest physician ever hired at the Mayo Clinic, and but we actually we actually went to premarital counseling. That's how bad our engagement was. So, and she, as her suggestion, and then like after about 4 weeks of premarital counseling, it was pretty obvious that we should not be married. And actually, we stayed friends for a number of years afterwards. But it's a battle, and it's not easy. It's actually, getting out of it is simple, but it's not easy. And it's because you have to catch yourself asking the wrong questions and having the conversations that don't serve you in your head. And again, Jordan Peterson writes about this, that you have conversations in your head that you would never allow anyone else to have with you.
yep, yep,
Yeah, I mean, he said he said, like, you would probably punch somebody in the face if they started to talk to you like that.
yeah, exactly. That's the first sign that you clearly are not talking to yourself. Would you really talk to somebody else like that? And for yourself, when you worked through that process, did you practice and work on different questions in your head? Like, for example, what's great about this instead of why is this happening to me?
You hit the word what, and one of the things that when in my coaching, this is like the first thing is, okay. And first of all, Simon Sinek's got it wrong. Okay, you don't start with why, because when you say why, well, why what? Okay. And I get into, every once in a while I decide to become a keyboard warrior, and I get into it with Simon. So, and, he's done a great job with a lot of people and helped, make a difference in a lot of people's lives. So I'm not going to take that away, but it's just, in that famous TED talk, and thank God for Chat GPT, because I didn't have to do this by hand. I put it into Chat GPT or Grok, whatever that one, the Elon Musk one. And I said, how many times does Simon Sinek in his TED talk use the word why? And put another number and it said 47. And then the next thing was, how many times does he use the word what? Guess what? 47.
What does that
So
tell you?
so in the coaching that I do, we start with what? Okay. What do you want? And it's got to be, for coaching purposes, this is not therapy, it's coaching. Okay. So basically we're results oriented. So it has to be measurable, quantifiable. All right. So let's go back to the whole sex thing. Guys will say, well, I want more sex. What's more? I have no idea what more is.
Right.
How much are you having now and what do you want? Okay. More is not a number that I can measure. At the end of the month, I can't say I had more sex. I'm like, okay, how much did you really? And the question is, did you really have more sex? And by the way, was your wife in the room? Was she part of it or not?
Yeah.
That's the other question you got to ask. So you start with what, Okay, so let's say, okay, I want to have sex, and part of it is also having managing expectations. If you're having sex once a year or less than that, don't expect to be having sex 2 times a week after my 12-week coaching program. You know, if we can get you to once a month, that'd be pretty damn good. If we can get you once every other month, that'd be pretty damn good from zero. But if you're having sex once a week or once a month, then actually it's not that hard to get to a couple times a week.
Hmm.
Okay. But then a lot of it has to do, so you have to manage the expectations about where you are. So the question is, how much sex do you want to have? And so it has to be quantifiable. You have to be able to write it down. And you have to be able to measure it. It's kind of like, well, I want more money. Okay. Or I want to be rich. Well, okay, there's different kinds of risks. There's the guy who's got, a company that's worth 100 million. And then there's Elon Musk who's thinking about spending $1 trillion on something. I just can't put my mind around having a $1 trillion budget. You know what I mean?
Right. I love that.
There's not a lot of people, there's not a lot of people that actually think that. I mean, people go like, oh, I want to be like Elon Musk. There's not a chance. The man's a unicorn. You're not, you, you're not even, you probably will not get to one, most people will not get to 1/100th of his value. And they'd be really happy to get that. But you start with the what. Okay, so let's say what you want. I want more sex. So I will tell you that if you talk to your wife, and there's many people in committed relationships that we're talking to. Most of or you're in a committed relationship of some sort. But I'm going to say wife. If you say to your wife, "I want more sex," do you know what she hears? I mean, what she hears is, "Let me use your vagina for a few minutes, okay?
Yep.
And when I'm done, you can have it back. It'll be a little wet, but you can still, it's yours. You can have it back." But that's kind of what she hears. Just be a receptacle for my penis. And my coach calls it my coach calls it vaginal masturbation. Okay, it's just totally, it's without relationship. Maybe it was okay when you were in 20 and in college,
Hmm.
and that was a whole different ball game. I mean, there's no such thing as foreplay in college. Oh my God, just like just all of a sudden it was combustible. It was you're with your girlfriend or whatever. You're just combustible most of the time. It was just like boom. It was like it wasn't that it was just happening, spontaneously happened. And then all of a sudden it just started not happening like that. So
Yeah.
but
So you
the
can
the
ask that
thing
question.
don't there's the guys do not say I want more sex.
No doubt.
If you want, and the reality is you probably don't want more. You want to have the sexual part of it, but there's the other thing that you want spiritual, emotional, and physical intimacy.
There you go.
Okay, and you want to be wanted,
Yep.
because guys can play, oh, she never initiates sex. Well, maybe she did initiate intimacy, and so guys and women in different ways want the same thing. They want spiritual, emotional, and physical intimacy. And so that's the part that people miss. I mean, there's obviously people that don't really care for that, but it's kind of funny when I run into them on social media. I go like, "So you're divorced?" And they go, "Yeah." I guess I guess well, that I, that's pretty obvious. I had one guy that said he was I guess he's a podcaster. He said the major purpose of a woman is her vagina. And he put that on a post, on a comment to one of my posts.
Yeah. Yeah. Clearly he's not
Yeah,
married.
yeah. Right?
Yeah, exactly. So,
Okay.
step one, let's talk about that. How does a man diagnose what's actually going on without blaming?
It's kind of an interesting word to use, the word diagnose, because there's so many different facets to it. So the part of it is a lot of times one is that you change, and we all change in terms of what our sexual drive is. Okay. Your sexual drive, a man's sexual drive in his 30s is not the same as it was in his 20s. Same thing is true for a woman. So they don't. So part of it is that they don't adapt to that. Women's testosterone starts to drop in their 30s, which also that's kind of a lot of times when people start not having to want to have as much sex. And testosterone is a very big, important hormone in terms of women having sex, including guys too. But guys usually get in their 40s and 50s. That's when their stops. The other thing that happens a lot of times, and this is would be with couples that have kids. Kids are cock blockers.
You just said
Okay,
it. Yeah. No,
what's
no
that?
mincing words. No mincing words. I
Well, of
love it.
course they are. Well, no, I mean it's obvious. I mean, why? I don't argue the obvious. I mean, gosh, so no, and part of it is that it all starts off really kind of cool. Get the kids, all of a sudden they're walking around the house, they're coming crawling into your bed or sleeping in your bed. You wake up and then like, there's a whole bunch of people, kids in their bed. And then of course, usually that's on a weekend. And so obviously not much is happening in that bed outside the kids being there and whatever, everybody's tickling each other and this and that, laughing and stuff like that. And the other thing that happens is that when kids enter the equation, a woman's primary role in terms of, I think, a lot of her physiology changes from being wife lover to mother, and that's kind of her primary. And so it's hormonal, it's nature at work. That's her primary function. So they do that, and then all of a sudden even then after the kids stop coming into the bedroom, and at some point they should. I think it's really weird. You got some people that have an 8-year-old in their bedroom. What the hell's wrong with you? It's weird. It's weird. It's kind of like, you have kids. That's right. Yeah. I mean, there was a time that you would take a bath with the kids, but at some point it just was weird, and you knew it was time to stop that,
Yeah.
right? It's like, okay, no, 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 it's just too weird now. So that's kind of happens. But then once that habit is established, then you're kind of in a whole different ball game with it. And the mother's role, and I was a very active father. I have two daughters. They're in their 20s, gainfully employed, out of college, all that stuff, doing well. But I was very active in my kids' life, in my daughter's lives, because I was fortunate in a position where I could drive kids to work, to school, to sporting stuff, and I do a lot of stuff with them, things like that. But even as active as I was, and my wife and I talked about this, is that 75% of it fell on her and 25% on me.
Hmm.
Okay. I mean, and like I said, it wasn't like I was shirking duty. It wasn't like I was pretending I was busy when I wasn't or whatever. It just kind of happens naturally. And so there is a lot of fatigue
Hmm.
that goes along with taking care of kids, especially if mom is staying home with the kids, taking care of them. I mean, I guarantee you, she doesn't want to have, when you come home at 6 o'clock or whatever, she's not thinking about sex. She's thinking about having a glass of wine and just
Yeah.
finding a place to be alone for a few minutes.
Yeah.
And so that kind of happens too. And then the other thing the diagnosis is that you stop doing the things that you used to do to be on the hunt. In the people nicely refer to it as the courting phase.
Yeah.
I don't, and you obviously I'm gonna have a different that's my thing. It's the getting your hand in her pants phase. So this is so that's kind of like that's gone, and so you in a lot of ways both of you have become boring.
Okay.
Okay, and it just kind of feeds on itself, and then and it just kind of goes on. You're busy driving. Then once the kids start school, there's sports, there's band, whatever, all that other
Varsity.
shit. They go back and it's this kind of stuff. If you're lucky, I mean, and we were lucky. We actually had a nanny for a number of years, and that was like, but it was still a lot of stuff that was going on, especially if your kids are going to two different schools, which is not that uncommon, because one school is good for one kid, but it's not good for the other kid. So you got to work all those things out, and so there's all that stuff happens, and so you drift away, and maybe you're the guy that goes to the gym for a long time, or decides to play golf all the time with his buddies, and so you're not home, and then so she kind of maybe, who knows what she's doing? You don't know what she's doing, because you guys aren't talking anymore. There's no communication between you. So it becomes a challenge to have that kind of stuff going on. So it progresses. And again, as you said earlier, a lot of times you don't really know what's happening. And next
No
thing you
doubt.
know, someone is,
I think a lot of people can relate to that, Orist. And I think if we were to kind of define that step one, it's understanding, obviously without blame, right? Understanding that your lives together have changed. They no longer were the same when you were courting each other. And that it's no one's fault. It's just a dynamic of life, a dynamic of health. It's a natural thing. And maybe also step one is to understand and remember that, if you were courting, you would actually have carved off a lot more time for that person to court them. And that's
Mhm.
why you have that intimacy. So, I guess step one is just identify why things have changed. So step two, the question I would have for you would be, what must change first? Is it his behavior, the relationship dynamics, or the conversations?
Well, the thing about relationship is that guys and actually women do the same thing. They say they're going to do shit and then they don't. Okay. So, and that, the most egregious form of that is the wife beater. Beats the shit out of his wife. You know, Police come, they arrest him. He goes spend the night in jail, comes out, promises that he'll never do it again, begs her for a few months to let him back in. She does, and he beats her up again. And so it's a vicious circle. But the challenge is that a lot of times people are out of integrity and don't do what they say that they're going to do. And so your wife may hear you say, I'm going to do that. And she's heard you say that so many times. She doesn't give a shit about what you say. She's looking at what you're doing. Okay. What you say is totally irrelevant. As a matter of fact, you could do something without saying it and it would be better. The worst thing you can do is say you're going to do something. And this is true. This is true in anything, true in relationships, true in business, or whatever. Saying that you're going to do something and then not following through. In business, that's like you you got maybe two shots of that with me, and then I'm done. You're cut out of you're cut out of my world. So I think that's really the most important thing is to keep your word and do things. Don't just talk about it. You can't talk. You can't talk your way into more intimacy.
Hmm.
Maybe you could, to a certain extent, you could beg your way into more intimacy every once in a while. Turn in your man card. But that kind of intimacy is not particularly good or frequent. She's just laying there for, well, oh God, please let the pounding be over so I can go back and watch my TV. So that's kind of the synopsis of everything that goes on. And there's things that you can do, uh, to change that. Part of it is, people make a big deal of it now, but I think it's very important to have a date night.
Okay. Well,
Okay.
we'll get to that point. So let's just recap for our listeners, just so it's maybe a little bit easier for them to follow. So step two is, so what must change first? You're saying honor your word. That's a really easy. Not This may not be easy for everyone, but it's a really clear step to take, and that will then probably change their behavior and their relationship dynamics, and maybe even lead to better conversations. So I think that's a really good answer to that, and that I think is just so simple for the listeners and the viewers to hear. Step two is that. Step three: what does rebuilding intimacy look like? Week to week, not just one good night, right? So I think you're about to get to some strategies, right?
Well, I think that the some of it is that a guy has to be on the hunt all the time.
Say that again.
You have to be on the hunt all the time. And I don't mean like looking for sex all the time. It's not I do this and I get sex. It's not a quid pro quo. But you have to be on the hunt, and part of that is being flirtatious, being fun, maybe saying something funny and inappropriate to your wife that might get you a love tap. That's always good. But you got to make her life good. You got to make her want to be around you. Because if you're that grumpy guy with that bad conversation, she doesn't want to be around you. Why would she want to be around you? She's been around screwing kids all day. Why would she come back? Why would she want to be about a grumpy guy at the end of that time? So I think that when I talk about being in the hunt, to be seductive and not seducing in sort of a fake way, but you always need to be seductive. And there's just so many little things that you can do. Again, depends on when I coach men, depends on where they start because there's some things that are just totally don't do that. Don't do that unless you're having sex at least once a month because you're gonna just it's just going to come off as manipulative and everything else. So I think that's kind of one of the things. One of the things that I've been doing with my wife, probably we're going on being married for almost 35 years,
Congrats.
and so she'll know something. But this I started doing this about 30 years ago. Every other week, and I was obviously sometimes I miss or whatever, but it's pretty regular. Every other week, I go to the supermarket and I buy a dozen red roses. Now they used to be $10, now they're 12, and put them in a vase, and I put them on a nightstand. Product placement, very important, on a nightstand.
Product
There's
placement.
a reason
Okay.
why it's there's a reason why it's on a nightstand, and so do that. And this is so funny. We were having dinner with our future with some friends, and we were talking about that, and and the guy goes, "Oh yeah, I do that." And then the wife looks at him. Yeah, she goes, "Yeah, you bring the flowers home, but then you make me put them in the vase." And I look at, great. You just gave your wife a job, another job to do. He goes, well, I don't know how to arrange flowers in a vase. I go, my God, you're a surgeon. You can't crack it.
That's so funny. All right.
Yeah, and now there's
Touche.
just tons of YouTube videos about how to arrange flowers in a vase. I mean, there's
Mhm.
no shortage of information on that kind of stuff. And so yeah, but yeah, because I've run that into a few times, and I said, okay, you just gave your wife a job
That's
or another
funny.
job.
So where does the execution typically fail in your experience with the people that you work with, and how do they prevent it?
Well, it usually falls apart with when I say it's simple but it's hard, and so consistent effort is hard over time. Okay, it's like being on a diet. You can be on a diet for 2 weeks and then all of a sudden shit falls apart. Next thing you know,
It's not a habit.
you
Yeah. It's
yeah,
not who they are. Yeah.
it's not a habit. Yeah. So I
Okay.
think that it's a continual. It falls apart on continual execution, also having unrealistic expectations, and not being aware of the situation. And I've done that. You know, I, where my wife was having a bad day and I was horny and I just wasn't paying attention to her day. And she let me know about that. So that's where it falls apart. And then the remedy is to large extent, this is a self-serving comment, is that most of us requires coaching at some point. We all require coaching. Some of us just accept the fact, and others deny the fact that coaching should be part of our part of our process that we live our life in. I mean, all the great athletes, I don't care who they are, have coaches. You know, Tony Robbins has coaches. Grant Cardone has coaches. My coach has coaches, and he pays them a lot of money. I mean, guys at that level pay their coaches seven figures,
Hmm.
maybe eight. Okay, but they all have coaches, and so if you're here, you're sitting there and you think, I can do this on my own. No, you can't, because again, I'll go
Yeah.
back to what I said. If you
Invest
could
in
do this
yourself.
on your own, you would have already done it, and you can't. You're gonna be good for a couple of weeks, and then all of a sudden you're gonna be back. And so that's part of it is that coaching and helping develop habits is the important thing. And so we're all human. I mean, I lift really heavy. I still am a power lifter, and so I'm working my way back up to 100-pound dumbbells and bench press. My personal record was 110s. There are days that I don't want to go to the gym, and most of the time, success requires you to do shit that needs to be done, even if you don't want to.
Hmm.
No doubt about it. Like there are days I really don't want to go, and maybe even the workout isn't that great, but going is better than not going at all. And so And that's true with anything. I mean, in your business or whatever, you have to do shit you don't want to do. And to a certain extent in a relationship, you may be, and I realized that I was being kind of selfish because my wife goes to a lot of the events with me that she probably doesn't really care to go to, but she keeps me company. And she asked me, she asked me to go to the symphony, which I really can't. I hate fucking symphonies. Oh, no, it was opera. It's even worse than that. It was opera, and I didn't really want to go to opera. And I thought I told no, and like she asked me the second time, I'm going like, Boris, you're being an asshole. You're being you know a self-centered asshole. She's asking you to come. She's asked you twice. Go. It's not going to kill you. You can have a drink there. That's the saving grace. You can have a drink. But so you have to be aware of the situation. And yeah, you do things, and she does shit for me that I know she doesn't want to do, but she does it. And fortunately, it's not that much, but there is shit that she does.
Got it. Okay. So the lever most men ignore is the emotional climate that they create every day outside the bedroom.
Like, yeah, it's the whole time. And I think that the again goes back to that whole thing is that none of this works unless you fix the relationship you have with yourself. Okay, you can buy all the damn roses. You can buy roses every week. I do it every other week because they die in a week, and then so when I get it in the second week, it's kind of a refresher. So that's kind of you'll notice if you buy roses, they'll die in a week. They'll die in about 5 to 7 days, and so then they get thrown out and then they get replaced after a while. And the easiest way to do that for someone that hasn't done it very well is put it in your calendar, in your Outlook or Google Calendar, and then put a recurring appointment to buy roses. It'll be the best $12 you spend.
Hmm.
It's,
She'll probably be a little suspicious initially.
what's that?
She
Oh,
may be a
exactly.
little.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. I was just getting ready to go into that. Yeah. So you're gonna go like, what do you want? And you just go like, nothing. So why'd you do that?
What'd you do
I
wrong?
said, I just want to let you know that I love you. That's all. And just turn around, and walk away. Just leave her wondering. It's a good wondering.
Don't ask for
I actually
anything
had a
or
woman.
attempt to get anything that night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, don't expect, don't, just because you brought home, flowers, you're not going to get a blowjob right there on the kitchen counter. Okay. That's just, maybe on a rare occasion, but for most guys, that's not going to, okay. It's just, it's just not going to happen like that. And it's not a quid pro quo thing. It's
Mhm.
not every time I bring roses, I don't get, just because there's 12 roses doesn't mean you're going to have sex 12 times that week.
Orist, could you tell us a real transformation story that comes to mind? Something that really stands out to you? Where did this patient, not a patient, where did this client start? What was the turning point for him? And maybe what did he stop doing?
I think the one that comes to mind is the one who's having sex about twice a year. And so we worked out what he was doing. Okay. And this is again the other thing is part of coaching is that I think if you find a good coach, they only spend 10 to 20% of the time on the problem. The rest is on the solution. Okay. Because a lot of times the problem may have happened so long ago it doesn't matter today. Okay. It may not matter. In some cases it may matter or whatever. Maybe some emotional hurt that you get over. But in this particular situation, we're able to get to where we're having sex, every few weeks. Okay, but maybe once a month, sometimes sometimes a couple times a month, sometimes, once every 6 weeks or something like that. And so that was a big step from where he was. And part of that was the roses, the being more flirtatious, having a better personality himself. Again, you're not attractive if you're, an asshole all the time. And we talked about how that would show up, and and how if he felt rejected, he would get pissed off, which is not going to get you more sex. It's going to get actually going to get you much less, and maybe even divorce papers. And so we did that. We talked about the foreplay. So if you are most of the men that I'm dealing with, and this particular case is also true, they were he was in his early 60s, she was in 50s, and foreplay is so much important, and it's not just when you're in bed. The flirtation is the first step of foreplay. Okay, That's the first step, and that continues on. And a lot of times, the other thing, and this is not in this particular case, but a lot of times, if your wife initiates sex, she's probably been thinking about it all day. It's not like it's not like at 5:30 she said, "Oh, I want to have sex with you at 6." She's probably been thinking about it all day, and kind of as women get older and as guys get longer, there's a longer runway to it. And actually, the other thing is that for guys, one of the important things also in terms of changing that relationship again is like what's in it for her. Okay. So
Okay.
if you're like, you know, Wham Bam Thank You Ma'am, it's a great song. Everybody, yeah, every guy smiles when they hear that. It was great. It was great when you were in your 20s because that everybody was happy with that. It wouldn't matter. But when you're in your 50s, 60s, and it's not that way, and that's not going to have her wanting to come back for more. And again, and not only that, but you know, treat it more like a fine wine. You know, enjoy it, take time, and there's a tremendous amount of pleasure for me being able to satisfy my wife. I really that's an important part of us having sex and being
Hmm.
intimate is for me to make sure that that she enjoys it, has pleasure.
Yeah, it's strange to, I don't know, maybe it's just a me thing, but it's strange to think that there are married men out there that don't care about that. If they need your coaching, that's probably one of the biggest changes they can make right there
You know,
is maybe no
well,
longer selfish, right?
okay. So so I forget where are you located? I don't.
Virginia Beach.
I'm sorry, just like you told me that earlier. So one of the things that happens, and this guy made a big mistake because he didn't sign up to be a client with me, and his problem was really easy to deal with. If you are hormonally out of sync with your partner, then it's not a good thing, and it goes both ways. Myself, I've been on testosterone for over 25 years.
Okay.
Okay, and so I'm very familiar. I mean, I have a presentation I do, a scientific presentation on testosterone, and I had a couple of physicians in the anti-aging space heard it, and they said like, "Oh, yes, that was spot on. Everything you said was absolutely correct." But if a guy is on testosterone, that helps his libido as he gets older, among a whole bunch of other things, including muscle mass, bone density, all these other things. And if his wife is not on hormone replacement therapy, then there's kind of a tension there, okay? And because he's hornier physiologically than she is. And the flip side is also true. So it's good when both are. And actually, one of my physicians I just turned on to testosterone, and he got his wife on hormone replacement therapy, and he said life is great. But I had this guy, and he said he's he said several things in terms of that he was losing his masculinity, and he was in a no sex marriage. Okay, the challenge was he was in a no sex marriage, but his wife wasn't,
Mm,
and she was literally fucking the pool boy in their bed.
shit.
And and I actually ran into a woman. We go to Park City fairly often, and I was going out having a cigar, and she was talking about that, and she was talking about somehow we got on hormones because she asked me what I do and things like that, and so I've spent a lot of time in the anti-aging space, and she was telling me how that she and her husband are at different levels of physiologically in terms of their need for intimacy, where she wants a lot more intimacy than he wants. And he doesn't do any testosterone. She does hormone replacement therapy. So again, she's just right for an affair.
Hmm.
I mean, it's very likely to happen.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, warning signs, right? Let's do myths and objections here. So, what's the biggest myth men believe about a dead bedroom, and what's the truth?
And you can't turn it around. And also that's her fault. That's yeah, it's her fault. Yeah. Yeah. I've had guys tell me, why don't you just talk to my wife? I go like, that's fucking weird. I'm not gonna talk to your wife about your sex life. Don't you think it's weird enough that you're talking to me about your sex life? You think I'm gonna go talk to your wife about your sex life? No,
Uh,
no. And by the way, remember that thing that we talked about? It's not what you say, it's what you do. So one of the myths is that like you can talk your way into more sex. No, you can't. You can't talk your way into more sex. It's just not possible. And guys try to do that. Oh, well, I talked to her like, well, yeah, how'd that work out for you? Then, she talking involves being logical. Intimacy is about emotion. It's visceral. It's feeling. And you can't talk your way into visceral feeling unless it's being pissed off. Then you can get then you have all sorts of problems. But trying to create intimacy is a visceral emotional thing. It's not a logical thing. And that's where talking gets you. And there are things like, oh, well, we're married, we should be having more sex. Well, I didn't see that in the marriage contract anywhere.
Yeah.
I
You put your own
mean,
rules there.
there have been those contracts though. I know I don't know if it's true or not, but nobody under 60 remembers who these people are. But when Aristotle Onassis married Jacqueline Kennedy, they had a sexual performance contract.
Yeah, interesting. Odd segue, but to the next one, which would be what's the most common mistakes you see men repeat?
Trying to work alone.
Trying to work alone.
Yeah, trying to solve this on their own. And then the other big one is that it's not true that people don't talk about their sexual problems in a way that's solution focused. But what they do is they get around, a bunch of guys get around, and they basically have a wife complaining about their wife party. A
Mm-hmm.
bitch. It's kind of it's kind of a no sex circle jerk, and it's they sit there and they do this, and first of all, it ingrains that behavior, and it's none of those guys knows what to do. Turn it around. You might as well go into a McDonald's and ask the fattest person in there about health advice. I mean, that's the equivalent of what that is. All those people don't have a clue. It's just kind of like, I mean, this sounds very elitist. I don't talk to anyone about financial advice that lives in a smaller house than I do. I mean, it's kind of like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? There was before the big crash in 2007. Everybody was an expert in real estate.
All right.
They were riding a wave. They didn't know that wave was going to die. It was a tsunami wave, and when it crashed, it sucked everybody back into the ocean.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
No, that's really
so
good.
so yeah. I tell that to my kids all the time. Sometimes I actually listen to what I say. I say, be careful that who you take advice from. Does that person really know what they're talking about, or are they just happen to be the loudest person?
Amen to that. All right, so we're gonna play a game.
Okay.
So I'll sort of give you the title of the game, and then I'll prompt you with how we're gonna play it. This game is called "The Three Things Never to Say If You Want More Sex."
Okay.
All right, so we want to get three phrases from you, and for each one, what is a communication underneath it, and what to say and do instead for each one.
Okay. I'm going to shorten this game up because it's in my book.
Okay.
The three things that you should never say to a woman if you want more intimacy is, I want more sex. Number two is, I want more sex. And number three is, I want more sex. Okay.
Yeah.
It's very simple. And people say that they say that all the time, and they end up with the same result. They have less sex. And then, we spoke about this basically, if they do get it, it's vaginal masturbation. She's not particularly into it. There's not much in it for her. She's just waiting for it to be over. She's looking at the dust on the ceiling fan, and so there's no reason for her to come back for more.
Okay.
You have not made her feel like a woman.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes complete sense. So, what if we have a listener that is also wondering what's the phrase that I can have so that, all right, so maybe the question isn't, hey, how do what are the things I can say to have more sex? What is the thing to say where that guy feels more
This
wanted?
reminds me of this answer reminds me of the clickbait of how to pick up women on the internet for buy my program for $29.95 with
Yeah.
with lines
I'll
to
give you the
lure
lines
a
to
woman.
say so that that
Give
girl
you a
tomorrow gets
yeah,
her
yeah.
number.
So I could give you the line, but unless you really mean it, and you can't fake meaning it,
Yeah, no doubt.
you can't fake meaning it. But one of the things is that the line is, I want us, and the operative word is us, to have more spiritual, emotional, and physical intimacy.
Yeah. I want to feel
That's what
closer.
I'd like for both. I want them for both of us.
Mm-hmm. And I know
And the
you want it
question
too.
is, and the question is, what do I have to do to make you feel that way.
Yeah.
You
What do
can't
you need?
control what she does.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you gotta be surprised at what she says. But that's like the first question you ask, and you just don't come home and like, I listen to this guy and he told me to say this, told me to say this, and blah blah. It doesn't work that way. You kind of have to do a little bit to get into that. And then the other thing is that most guys, and this is true for most women, they cannot clearly articulate what they want. So so I think part of that conversation is like, what do you want? And so it's not an ambush. Say, I want to have a conversation with you, a nice conversation, not where we're yelling, we're pissed off because we've been drinking and angry at each other. But I want to know, what do you want? And I don't expect you to give me an answer right away, because I think that's a hard question to ask. I'm sorry, to answer. It's a hard question to answer. What do you really want? And then of course you set the parameters that, yeah, I said my coaching, I said we talked about here. It needs to be measurable and quantifiable. I have to be able to say, when I've got what I want when this happens. Okay, that's what I want. It can't be whatever. It has to be quantifiable. And most things are, the areas that I work in is family, fitness, finances, really easy to quantify. The hardest one to quantify is faith. That's the one that's really, it's always a challenge to quantify, because
I
how
guess.
do you qualify something that you can't see, you know or touch or feel? So
Yeah.
it becomes
Measure.
that's the hardest one to quantify. But everything else is really easy to quantify.
So we poll our listeners and we let them know what topics we're covering. And we had someone, Stan, he submitted a question today. And when they do ask these questions, we'd like to bring it up in some of the recordings when they're appropriate. And this one's fitting. So I'd love to ask Stan's question, and maybe you can give Stan the answer too. Stan says,
Okay.
my wife says she loves me, but she never wants sex. I've tried talking, helping more, and waiting. What do I do now?
Okay. So first of all, stop the talking. Okay. Because we know that doesn't work. I'm not sure what love is without spiritual, emotional, physical intimacy. I think that's a big part of it. My other my other question to him is that, has this always been part of your marriage, or is this something new? Is she premenopausal or perimenopausal or in menopause? The other thing that quite often women are don't discuss with their husband is that as they get older, sex becomes painful. So I'm not trying to duck his question, but there's so many parameters to that it's kind of that's more of a deeper dive to figure out what's going on. And then we go back to some of the things, like, if I the starting point with in my coaching program, essentially for most of the time, is roses every other week, and you need to do that for several months. You may need to do it for a year before you start seeing some results. And that's where the simple but hard comes in, because it's consistent. You're putting in all this effort, and you're getting very little, if any, return on your effort. And that's the hardest part, to keep on going, keep on going, keep on going. Perseverance is a big word in the Bible. It's used all the time, and part of that is basically dealing with in situations where you're not seeing the benefits of the work that you're putting in. But I can guarantee you that if you stop, you'll never see them. And so that's kind of my question. Is there's so many variables to that. It's never.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Is it painful for a lot of women? When and if you had it, was she having fun? Were you guys having fun, or was it wham bam thank you man?
Mm-hmm. Well, Oris, this has been great. It's a topic that I think is uncomfortable for some, but we're certainly all living it, men and women. And I think it's a topic that probably isn't talked about enough. So I'm glad that you're out there. I'm glad you're doing what you're doing, and that folks can find you, that our listeners can find you. So where can people find you and go deeper and get some help if they need it?
Sure. You can go and schedule a no pitch short call with me. You go to droristk.com/discovery call, or .drorestk. I want to get Dr. Orist believe it or not, somebody already took Dr. Orist. It was amazing. There's a chiropractor in Canada.
Chiropractor. I was
So,
going to say.
Dr. Orist K.com discovery call. And we have a short call and we see whether, you know, whether there's any point in us having a more extensive call. Because I don't pitch you anything. I'm not going to say like, buy this or whatever, blah, blah, blah. That's not going to happen on that call. So that's just more to say like, okay, are you interested? Can you handle the way I talk? I'm not for everyone, obviously.
You're a fresher breath of air, man. Look, I think if our listeners have followed this whole episode, I think they can see that you genuinely care. I think they can see that you have experience with this. And truly, if you feel like any of this resonates, and hopefully you're watching this and you're like, hey, man, it doesn't. I'm getting it plenty of times. Great. Well, now you've got some nice little tips to keep that going, right? Because maybe you don't have kids yet or your wife isn't at menopause. These are great nuggets to sort of prevent that. But if you are in that, invest in yourself, invest in your marriage. This is probably a lot less expensive than a divorce. Should I put it out there like that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Without a doubt. Without a doubt. Yeah. Yeah. Without a doubt. And, you brought up something that I also talk about it. People think like, oh, everything's great. I'm just going to maintain status quo. There's no such thing as status quo. You're either getting better or you're getting worse. And if you're engaging in attention, you're getting worse and your life's going to go from very good to fair to poor to shit show. And that happens all the time because people stop paying attention. So, yeah, no, Chuck, I appreciate you. We have had time to talk and hopefully there's some value here for people.
Yes. Yeah. And if you got value out of today's episode, please subscribe. Send this episode to someone that you know. Hopefully they don't get the wrong opinion when you share this with them. But if you know, hey, you're complaining at the cooler with them, yeah, send that because this is an opportunity for you to change and help their marriage as well. So, and also, of course, leave a comment, do a little like you like. That helps with the channel, all the above. So thank you for being here, Orist. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I hope everybody has a lovely day and enjoy your life.